All right, this is a meeting of the Auburn School Committee, August 12th, 2020. I'd like to call this to order. I do not see any citizens to comment. So we will move on to special recognitions, and for that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hanfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. It's with a very heavy heart today that we begin this meeting to honor the memory of longtime Auburn resident Michelle Fuller, a preschool teacher here at Here We Grow for a long time, and a fierce advocate for education within the town of Auburn. She passed away from cancer on Saturday afternoon. Within the school walls, she was always present. She worked on our best practices grant committee to secure funding for our preschool startup. She served on a number of PTO committees, ARC at the Auburn Middle School, and most recently served with me during my time as high school principal on our site-based improvement council. She always had a smile, and she always had a Starbucks for me and her. And she always had great conversation and great questions. And she will certainly be missed. She leaves behind her husband, Chris, her two sons, Adam and Trevor, who she always talked about. They were the light of her life. Many family and many dear friends. Her wake will be this evening at Britton Wallace here in Auburn from 4 to 7. And then her funeral ceremony service will be at North American Martyrs tomorrow at 10. And then it's a private burial for family after that. But very sad. And we'd just like to take a few minutes to pause here and recognize Michelle's loss. Thank you.
I would now entertain a motion to accept the minutes of 8/5/2020.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting, 8/5/2020.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway?
Yes.
And Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. We now move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we've discussed in previous meetings, we're in the process, obviously, of creating a district reopening plan, which is now back before you for a second read. This plan was required to be sent to DESE August 10th. However, late last Friday, the deadline was extended to August 14th. Since our August 5th meeting, we've added additional sections. We've also been revising as necessary. We've reviewed this second iteration with the Return to School team, our administrators, the Auburn Education Association, and the Department of Health and Inspectional Services. On behalf of the town's DPH, the plan, for the most part, was affirmed by Darlene Coyle. We're working out a few communication protocols between the nurses and DPH, and those could be worked out as of this call. Dr. Chamberlain's been working on that this morning. And we're also finalizing the metrics that would potentially cause a school and or a school and or district closure based on, increased spikes in COVID cases. In my report to you, literally this news was breaking as I was getting these comments prepared. So attached is an email in your packets from Darlene Coyle to Dr. Chamberlain, just regarding her thoughts, on the plan as it is presented. And then what I'd like to do now is for people at home. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So yesterday, well, let me back this up. So 2 weeks ago, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents sent a letter and requested a meeting with Governor Baker around the idea of metrics in terms of what would be some metrics that could be standardized across the state so that school districts weren't kind of, going blind in terms of whether to advance in their reopening or to retreat in their reopening or to stay the same. Governor Baker was extremely amenable. As a matter of fact, he met with the Mass Association of School Superintendents on a Saturday afternoon and committed to the Superintendents Association that in fact he would work with DPH to come up with some metric that would be sensible and that could be used as a guide to help districts make decisions relative to school openings or, like I said, school closures or staying, somewhere in the middle. So as you can see on this color-coded chart, it's broken out in unshaded, which basically means fewer than 5 total cases, as it says there. Green, the average daily cases per 100,000 is less than 4. Yellow, the average daily cases per 100,000 are between 4 and 8. And then red has average daily cases per 100,000 greater than 8. And then there's a corresponding chart over here on the side that basically would, that gives us DESI's designation or suggestion. It's not a mandate in terms of what you would do at the local level as it relates to operation of your schools. Yesterday, information as Governor Baker was releasing this information, Auburn fell into the yellow category, and that caused a bit of a stir in the community with some, and I understand that. So myself and Town Manager Jacobson were fielding calls and emails around what that meant. So what it really means is just what it says. We have between 4 and 8 per 100,000 on that metric. If we were in school, we would be we are perfectly aligned with a hybrid, or if there are extenuating circumstances, a remote shift to schooling for our kids. But it's important to understand that this is a 14-day rolling average, as it states here at the bottom, and that this data changes weekly. So I haven't, quite frankly, I just haven't had a chance yet to look at today's map of the state, but an updated map should have been out today that could have Auburn in green, could have us still in yellow. I don't know. I have to go and look.
Jared, it should be up by 4 o'clock today. It
Yeah,
wasn't
4
up.
o'clock.
Yeah, it wasn't up before the meeting. I checked.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So by 4 o'clock today, we would have an updated map. And then it would, very well, show where we are, here in this metric. So again, it's rolling, as it says at the bottom, it's 14-day, 14-day rolling average and reported weekly by DPH on their dashboard that's accessible through the state website. So this is one metric that we will, be using. What we're looking for here obviously would be trends in terms of cases presented. This isn't the only piece that we would be using, to make a determination on school, but it would be an important piece, and it would be further discussion with our local Department of Public Health, and certainly discussion with you as the school committee, who would make that decision in terms of what we would be doing, relative to any alteration in school plans that were currently underway. So I felt it was important just to post this in this fashion. I do intend to send out a communication to families later this week, just kind of tying up a few different ends that are still out there relative to what people can expect as we start moving forward into August and September as we prepare for school to begin. But again, I just wanted to show that metric to the viewing audience so that they had some frame of reference. This came from the commissioner himself. I'm not sure if he's posted it on DESI's website yet, but this was sent to us late last evening. So I felt it was good for fostering discussion around the topic. So I don't know if I know there's probably some questions. Dr. Chamberlain, I'm not sure in your conversations today with DPH if you had any further insight into their thinking on this, or I know they were still unpacking it.
They are still working on it. Today's conversation with them, and I cannot express how wonderful they've been to work with and insightful and thoughtful about our return to school. But today I met with them along with our school nurses around some scenario type questions, which we're going to continue to discuss so that our nurses all come back really prepared to face any eventuality that might come their way. But they are still looking at this. So we didn't quite get to that, but I'm going to be reaching out to them in the next couple of days. They wanted a couple of days to kind of look at it, and we'll discuss further then. But they've been wonderful.
Excellent. Any comments or questions?
I have one comment.
Go ahead, Gail.
I believe the data for Auburn also includes our nursing home, which at one point was bringing the results quite a bit higher. Maybe they have it under control now, but I hope people keep in mind that that is part of our data. It isn't just.
Casey, your email's up on the screen now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to shut my my share off here. I apologize.
Chair, as of right now, the nursing home is under control. I haven't looked at the assisted living we live in that's in town, but there are, in the numbers for the last 2 weeks, there are a couple of cohorts or people who live together who have tested positive. So it's not like the numbers are all individual, random throughout the town. There is some kind of continuity to it. So that's why, even though, you know, it's something to definitely pay attention to and follow all the protocols, I would be more concerned if it was all different people don't live together throughout the entire town, personally.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Any other comments, questions?
Gail, if I could just say that when the commissioner presented this, because many towns are like us with a nursing home or assisted living in their town, he said that should be considered in looking at these numbers. These numbers, as Meg said, don't reflect that at all, but should things dramatically change, we'll need to kind of know that, right? Where the numbers are coming from, and the Board of Health will assist with that. So
Good.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none.
Through the chair, it's very thorough. I thought it was very thorough, very well done document, and I appreciate all the links to it, ancillary documentation. I think we're probably quite far ahead of some of the other districts, so I really appreciate everyone's, dogged devotion to getting this document pulled together and on time and working together. So thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, agreed. I mean, it's been quite a task to put this together. I have to, give a special thank you to Dr. Chamberlain, who's been coordinating a lot of this with the principals. I've certainly, put my 2 cents in there as well in areas, but Dr. Chamberlain has been working very, very diligently with our principals to pull this together. And also has to be a thank you to our return to school team as well. They have looked at this. They have sent very thoughtful email comments and questions on behalf of the community back to us. And we've been able to work with them in a timely fashion to address those concerns. I suspect that will continue through, and this kind of leads into the revision of the proposed timeline that you see also in the superintendent's report, that we are leaving this document open for continued review and revision. The plan, if accepted here for the purposes of town hall, the plan would be that we would submit this to DESE August 14. We would release this to our families townwide to let them know that this is a preliminary draft. I would let them know that we have next week, August 17th, we're taking the town hall approach. We're kind of tweaking it a little bit. We're going to, on the week of the 17th, have a town hall meeting, recorded style, which, what does that mean? That means that we'll be asking families to send us questions ahead of time, and that the principals are going to be doing building tours. When we talked last, we talked about principals going through their buildings and showing people what it would be like to come to school for the first time and what they could expect. And so the principals within that tour would answer people's questions within their, as they get into those different parts of the buildings. Once that would be submitted out to families to watch, they would be invited to submit additional follow-up questions the week of the 24th. That would be a live town meeting with principals to answer those questions and for the community to ask any additional questions. We want to give the opportunity to the community to really look through this document. We want to also make sure that we're being very thoughtful in the terms of people's time. As we've looked around at other communities, town hall meetings that have taken place have gone in excess of 6 hours, where people are asking questions and there's comments and it's repetition. And so we just didn't feel, after looking at what some of our colleagues have gone through, that really made the most sense. So we've devised this slightly altered kind of town hall meeting approach. And then after the town hall meetings and questions from families and any refinement to the report that would come as a result of the town hall meetings, our continued discussions with AEA, our continued discussions with the return to school team, and certainly our continued discussions with you. We would look on August 26th to bring it forward for basically a final approval, understanding that moving forward, there could be some slight alterations based on, how COVID goes.
Well, through the chair, Casey, I think that sounds great. I think what might also be helpful would be to, I guess, similarly to, making the most of people's time during the call, maybe just having an FAQ site for return to school just right up there on the district or each of the school pages, because some people will go through and read this whole thing and they'll watch all of the documentation, but others might just look for the quick and dirty version.
So that's a good point. I think one of the things that Dr. Chamberlain did that was really excellent was that there is, when you look at this return to school document, it's all hyperlinked. So if people want to hit the hyperlink, they can go to where they want to go to. There's also an executive summary site that will hit the nitty gritty, hit the real pertinent details. And if people want to go deeper, then they can, like you said, go through the whole document. But I also think, too, to your point, we were talking as an admin group earlier this week, the questions that are coming in from community, because we are answering questions on the daily from families, questions. We're starting to see those questions break off into very specific themes, and the ones that you might imagine, like how's lunch going to be handled, or, what happens, if a child's suspected of having, COVID or illness or whatever, what triggers a building closure, is it the whole district, or is it things like that? Those real kind of big things, that families are really seemingly continually asking us over and over again.
Right.
We would generate something like that and put it up, maybe even include it as an insert to this, as well.
That might, I think that might just maybe give you one more layer of a bit of a buffer, because if you're, no need to answer the same question 100 times over, even though they are, equally important from every parent that raises them. Anything that gives you guys back your time to work in the really,
Sure. Yeah, no, those are
detailed parts of it.
Yeah, no, those are good points, and like I said, we certainly will take that, and we'll definitely do something with that. Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions?
Through the chair, just reading about the COVID room, every school, do we have somebody who will be monitoring that? Are we well staffed for that? And nursing in the buildings, we're okay there too?
So those are some of the logistics we're still working on, because we really feel like, the nurse needs to handle anyone with suspected COVID symptoms, right? They're the ones that are going to be most familiar with donning the PPE and handling all of that in the safest manner possible. What we're trying to figure out is how then do we monitor the nursing offices, right? Because now she's going to be in the isolation room, but we feel like for monitoring purposes only, I should say not even monitoring, supervising that area, we will have people that will be able to do that. What we also hope in all of our conversations is that people don't send their child to school sick.
Please.
And I think, yeah, if we can really get families to really embrace that, I think that all of these, I mean, our nurses are trying to deal with 100 scenarios that they keep running through their own head. Hopefully, it's not going to be that situation that often, because the child got up in the morning and didn't feel well, and the parent kept him or her home. So that's going to be the key to this really working. But we are, you know, all the buildings now are working with their nurse to figure all that out. The isolation rooms have been identified. They're provisioned with what, or we're getting provisioned with what they need. So we're well on our way with that.
I just know that there aren't, you know, they could have just one or two symptoms and have to be, you know, sent home for that and have to go into the COVID room. So, you know, if parents can, and I'm sure we'll definitely be pushing that during the town halls, but it's not, my kid has a runny nose and a cough, I'll send him to school. It's, you know, no big deal. That's my big concern.
Yeah.
Well,
Jesse,
Oh, sorry. So just like a side comment, my kids heard about the isolation room. If you can include that in your video of what it looks like and how it's not terrifying, that would be good, because they have a lot of anxiety over ending up in that room. I will not send them to school
No,
sick.
that's a good point.
But
that's a
if
good
they're
point.
freaking out, there are other kids probably freaking out
Well,
too.
exactly. And so I was going to say, so that's the other side of this too, right? Is that we're preparing this plan. And so we're giving our families, you know, 2 weeks, you know, to kind of really go through it and review it, watch the videos, whatever. And really what we're hoping, and I will ask them is that you talk about it with your kids, because your kids are going to have really good, insightful questions like, yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of that till you just said it. You know, what does an isolation room look like? Is it like a cave where you pull the shade and you're done? Like, what does that mean? So I could totally appreciate how anxiety provoking that could be. So it's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah. I told her, like,
also
you
not
know,
a nap room.
there'll be like fluffy pillows, but now I'm thinking, no, it's COVID, so there probably won't be fluffy pillows. I don't know.
We don't
Nothing
want the
soft.
nap. We don't want it to be known as the napping room or the I need a break room.
I told her the most she'd be in there, worst case scenario, was 30 minutes. So that's like the pickup time.
Also making sure that especially our younger kids, see what a person might look like in full PPE. You know, they're probably used to seeing people with masks now, but if these staff are in, you know, a face shield, a gown, a glove, that can be scary, especially if these kids are at school without their parents. So that might be something good to throw in that video too.
Definitely.
Probably good for all ages, quite frankly.
great points. Any other comments or questions? I had one question regarding absences. I know that is part of the criteria to get into some schools. We'll say my school, for instance, that's part of the criteria: behavior, absences, grades, that type of thing for entrance. Now, how is that going to affect our students? Are we going to be able to, I know we have to report those absences to the state, but are those going to be counted as official absences when it comes to reporting to other schools?
Yeah, so that's a good question, George, and it's one that's come up a few other times. You know, people concerned about, you know, the attendance policy and you know, what are the if there are any ramifications of a punitive nature, right? If data goes in. So at the state level, although we're being asked to report data around attendance, there's also the message, you know, from the commissioner around, you know, using good common sense, you know, as it relates to exercising attendance related issues. So for example, one of the biggest concerns becomes, you know, there is a statutory obligation that children under the age of 16 are in school. And so that is what it kind of prompted, you know, years ago in the district, the attendance letters that go out to families. And I know for a lot of families up and down PK to 12, you know, that can be very, very concerning, you know, that your child has been out X number of days, so on and so forth. In this particular case, for us, we will continue to maintain that data. In terms of how does that impact us, the school district, in terms of their our federal education status, so our MCAS reporting data and things like that, what level we're at in a given year, our attendance is a portion of that equation. But they are looking at easing that requirement as it relates to holding a school district responsible for the attendance piece. On the local level, the other concern is for stubborn children that do not come to school or are not coming to school. The juvenile courts are open and will be working with school districts to try to facilitate students coming to school. Oh, excuse me, Elaine's iPad just went on. So from a school standpoint, as it relates to attendance, we would have to really just use common sense around the fact that, it's not a normal school year. If we're not seeing a child, for a certain period of time, we would continue to follow up and do all of our work around making sure that our kids are attending school. But I think that we would really be hard pressed to put anything formal through to the court system and enlist their support unless it was just absolutely necessary. And that would be after, school reaching out like we always do multiple times, adjustment counselors reaching out, sending our school resource officers to do wellness checks. If we really just didn't have any other resort to get a family engaged in their child's education, then we would have to go to the court system. But from, there's nobody, I don't anticipate that being, a big issue. Certainly it could be an issue.
Yep. No, it sounds like you've given it some thought and it's pretty well covered. Specifically, my concern would be someone like my child who takes a great deal of pride in their attendance and for many years was never absent. And that was because we sent him to school with a runny nose or a cough. And we certainly wouldn't do that at this point in time. But I wouldn't want that to have an effect on him or any other youngsters in our district who are trying to get into a Bay Path, or I guess if you're going to a private school or St. John's or something like that, it's sometimes about the money. So I think they could probably forgive the absences. But schools where it is a little bit more competitive, that's my concern. I just want to. I don't know if we need a policy, but if we've got students who, if we look back and they've had great attendance over the years, and all of a sudden, they come up with a common cold a few times in 1 year, and that attendance goes down. And they get beat out in a spot trying to get into another school because of those few days out of school and because they were trying to do the right thing. That's what I want to avoid.
Dr. Chamberlain, I saw your hand go up.
Well, I was just going to say, so, there could be an instance where, a student, because of a family member, has to quarantine for 14 days, right? Which means they can't come to school for those days. I think what we can do is, and I would have to further check with our nurses, but they can document a lot of things in the nursing programming that they use. So, right, we can't hold that against the student. And actually, now I'm talking this through, the student would probably flip to learning remote if that were the case, so he or she wouldn't be considered absent. And I do think there was also a question at the return to school team that if in that case, I just have a little runny nose, but you're like, I'm not going to send you, is there an option? And I think we're building our assignments this way, that if the kids feel well enough, now obviously sometimes they're not going to be, right, that they can do schoolwork, but if they chose to do some of the assignments and perhaps check in at the morning meeting, that they still wouldn't be marked absent, even if they weren't physically in school on a day that they were expected to be. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
So that may mitigate some of what you're talking about, is kind of that backlash from being out, because if they're out for a 14-day quarantine, they can still participate in school. They can just do it remotely.
Yeah, I just see the concern being some of the extreme cases, as Casey mentioned a minute ago, where you've got students with a history, you're going to need to decipher which ones are going to be given credit for attendance.
Right.
Through the chair, a follow-up question to that specific to what Dr. Chamberlain just said. Are we, with regards to programming, are we actually looking at doing something like a live stream for kids that have actually still opted in for hybrid in the case that they are, do you have to quarantine for some reason?
Yeah, so we don't think we have the bandwidth for full live streaming, right? We've kind of talked about that several times, but I think we have to be a little bit flexible. So if that's the case, the parent's doing the right thing, keeping the child home, all the assignments for that day should be online. They should have some access to that. They could check in for a period of time, a short period of time. The teacher could kind of send them on their way. It would be a more independent day, perhaps, where they could still join any special or guidance or anything like that. And to me, they would be considered still in attendance, right?
Okay, so, but they wouldn't have the option to just kind of flip-flop into what the fully remote students are doing, because it sounds like the curriculum is slightly different. I'm just trying to.
I don't know if I don't think the curriculum will be different, but the timing of things could be slightly different, right? So that's where that gets a little bit funny, right? To kind of mix those two groups in and out, just because what that remote teacher might be doing in the morning might be different from what they might be a day behind or a day ahead or whatever that might be. So that might get tricky. But I do think that the hybrid teacher, right, who's now in the classroom and the students at home, can at least facilitate some of the learning or the activities that the student does for that particular day, hoping that that doesn't happen a lot. And if it does happen a lot, then it would be a shift to more remote, right? If a child really needed to be out for an extended period. Does that make sense? You know, it doesn't look like, yeah, okay.
No, it
Yes.
does. I was thinking through in terms of what Casey had said before, in terms of how we need to be able to pivot immediately. I think I had a different idea of, or I guess I envisioned it differently in that if a kid just had to stay at home for one reason, either way, they could pick up that day and be like, oh, well, I can't go in Mrs. Berg's class today, but there's another science teacher that has their Zoom meeting today at 1:00. So even though I'm not in Mrs. Berg's class, I'm going to go over to Mr. Whoever's class. So, but that's fine if that's not it. It was more just me trying to get a better understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I will make the motion to permit the superintendent to release the initial Auburn Public Schools reopening and readiness guide to the school community, submit to DESE on August 14th, and utilize the report in town hall meetings with students and families. It is understood the final document will come before the school committee on August 26th with any alterations for final approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I would just reiterate what Dr. Hanfield said, and also what Ms. Kaufman said as far as our preparedness and all the work that people have put into this. And you know, thank you, Dr. Chamberlain, and thanks to everyone involved. The AEA, it's really impressive, and it's impressive that you have the answers, and it's not something that you have to go research at this point. You put so much work into it that the answers are right there for families, for parents, for the school committee. You guys are just so prepared, and it's very impressive, and I'm happy that we're ahead of the game in relation to other districts. It's much appreciated. Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis? I think she said yes. Mrs. Harrington?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway?
Yes.
And Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Continuing on, just as a point of information, I had reported to you, I think a couple of weeks ago, July 29th, that on August 6th, we would be assembling a group of about 30 people consisting of parents, alumni, faculty, and staff. And there was a couple of school committee folks that jumped in too, which was nice to see. To have a discussion around social justice in the Auburn Public Schools. And that conversation did happen. It went for almost 2.5 hours. It was very informative. It was emotional. And it really started to foster very deep discussion around, you know, how and why to confront social justice issues within the Auburn community and what the school's role in that is. So this was an outgrowth, I think, as I said in the July 29th meeting, of a lot of the activity that took place in early June with the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. There was a lot of emotion from alumni at the high school level. There was a lot of emotion from community members and from conversations that I had from having attended both activities and protests at the library and at the police station. I felt it was necessary that we kind of have a conversation with everyone that was involved around that time. And so it was very informative. It was really more high school per se and alumni and community member discussion. But what we are now doing, and it says here, Lucas Bellistraci, one of our students, class of 21, said this work is going to be long, complex, and at times emotional, but it is worth the commitment to the cause for our students and our community. And that's what we settled on at the conclusion of that meeting. So now what we will be doing is we will be starting to open that conversation with our administrative team. And then we will start to put together a timeline or an order of events, rather, that makes sense. And so we will be putting together the minutes of that meeting and then sharing them out. I mean, they're very rudimentary minutes, and then sharing them out to the group that was around on the 30th, and you know, try to put together some ideas in terms of how we go forward. But it was a great first discussion, but again, it's going to be long. It's going to be a long undertaking, a lot of investment in time, but definitely something that I think is going to benefit the Auburn community overall. So I'll continue to keep you apprised as we move forward on that.
Concerning that, I did receive a few emails along that same subject line, you know, what changes are going to take place, what conversations are taking place. And my answer was that it is going to be a long process, but the conversations have begun. I would just ask everyone to just be patient because it is going to take a while. And I also reminded the few people that emailed me that, you know, we are in the middle of something very big right now. This is our first bout with a major pandemic. So, you know, nothing or nobody is taking a back seat on this. But we do have a focus right now on something that's a little bit more urgent as far as timelines. You know, we at this point we have about a month to go to make some things happen and get our kids at least back in school, you know, to some extent. So I just want people to understand that there is no back seat here. The conversations have begun. Please just be patient with us.
Yes, and through the chair, I just would like to say too, you know, so we're looking at, I mean, this is when we talk about this, you know, social justice, you know, right now, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, the treatment of African Americans, you know, is certainly taking center stage for good reason. We in the public schools are also, and we talked about this at our August 6th meeting, we're really looking to broaden the discussion that yes, it's race, 110%, but we want to look at all marginalized groups in our society. We want to look at sexual orientation. We want to look at gender. We want to look at socioeconomic status and you know, in inconsistencies. And what are the types of things that we need to be discussing? How are we needing to discuss those? What types of training and you know, programming, you know, is necessary for our teachers and our staff? And that is not to indict our teachers and staff in any way, shape, or form. It's to inform them about the issues within which we're discussing, because I will tell you, and I was very open in my discussion, you know, in that meeting with everyone, I'm questioning everything that I say and do around these issues, because this has given me time to really reflect. And, and I don't consider myself to be, someone out there that's doing things that are not correct or not appropriate or not kind. But there's still subtleties within all of these discussions that, aren't necessarily my fault per se, but I have to be aware of them. And you have to be able to come to the conversation with the understanding that this is not about being defensive. It's not about blame. It's about understanding, and it's about what do we do moving forward. And to your point, it's very well taken. It is not going to change like that, but we can start making some good headway on it. And that is going to be our intention over the next several years, to get some sort of an equity document created for the school district that focuses on all these issues. But to your point, COVID right now is dominating most of our time. So
Great
Through the chair,
commentary.
I just want to commend the teachers who came, and it really showed, especially at the high school level, the support that these teachers show to their students, not just their students, but the alumni. There were quite a few teachers who came in who you can tell had this strong relationship and want to see the change happen. I thought that was great.
Excellent. Gail, did you have something? Just unmute yourself if you do. No? Okay. We will move on to new business.
great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is slightly, I don't want to say dated, but we are trying to figure out what to do with it in terms of policy here in the town and across the schools as well. As we know, Governor Baker instituted a travel advisory August 1st to help keep the spread of COVID under control. There are some highlights below here that I placed into the superintendent's report. It's been posted on our school website. And just for the people at home, effective August 1st, 2020, Governor Baker has mandated that all visitors and returning residents into Massachusetts must follow new travel orders. Commonwealth has made great progress to slow the spread of COVID-19 and gradually reopen the economy, and all visitors now have a responsibility to help us keep transmission levels as low as possible. And then he goes on to talk about the necessary steps that need to take place in terms of creating a travel form, quarantining for 14 days or producing a negative COVID-19 test up to 72 hours after arrival in Massachusetts. And then that in fact, if the COVID test is not back within 3 days, people need to stay in quarantine until such time that they can be determined to be negative. And there's a failure to comply fine that municipalities may institute at the rate of $500 a day. I've been talking with town administration about this. Town Manager Jacobson just came to a final policy on her side. I don't know what happened there, but we're back. Did everybody drop out for a minute?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you, Casey.
Yeah, no,
it just it froze completely.
Yeah,
So.
it just totally dropped and popped back up. So I know we're clear for more than 40 minutes on this meeting. That was my first thing. I was like, ooh, maybe we're in that, but we're not. We're not. So in any event, there's a draft of the document that Town Manager Jacobson had provided me earlier in the week around this issue. for you to just kind of review and get a feel for. And then I anticipate I would bring